You think they've moved on, right? You think your avoidant ex is cold, detached, unaffected, but I'm here to tell you something that's going to shake your entire belief system. The very thing you're doing right now, no contact, isn't pushing them away. It's pulling them in. And guess what? Deep down, they're silently hoping you'll keep doing it. Why? Because it's waking something up inside them that they've been avoiding their whole life. Real emotional connection. Now let's get one thing straight. Avoidants aren't heartless. They're not robots. They don't shut down because they don't care. They shut down because they care more than they know how to handle. That feeling of closeness terrifies them because closeness was never safe for them. And when the relationship ends, they don't immediately feel the pain. No, they feel relief, temporary relief from that inner pressure of emotional vulnerability. But then you go silent. No chasing, no begging, no texting. Them paragraphs trying to fix it. And this right here is what hits them harder than anything else. Because when you stop reaching out, they finally have to face themselves. See, the avoidant ex is secretly hoping you don't come crashing back in. They're hoping you stay quiet because that silence, that space, starts doing the emotional work for you. You're giving them what they've always claimed they wanted, distance. But that distance becomes a mirror. It reflects back their own behavior, their own fears, their own emotional wounds. And the irony is, that's when they start feeling the one thing they're terrified of, longing. Your absence gives them clarity. It makes them wonder, why am I not hearing from them? Why aren't they chasing me? Were they the one person who actually understood me and now I push them away for good? That is what they're secretly hoping for during no contact. Not because they want you gone, but because they want to know that you have enough self-respect to walk away. They want to feel what it's like to miss someone who isn't trying to fix them. Because only then does the fear of losing you become real. Here's the truth no one tells you. No contact isn't about punishing them. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about standing in your worth. And when you do that, it sends a message louder than words. I don't need to chase love. I deserve love that shows up. Your avoidant ex might not say it out loud, but a part of them is rooting for you to keep doing this, to keep holding the line, to keep respecting your own boundaries, because that's what finally gets their attention. Not the drama, not the tears, but your peace. So if you're in no contact right now and you're wondering if it's working, listen up. It's not just working, it's transforming the dynamic completely. And more importantly, it's transforming you. When you go no contact with an avoidant ex, your first instinct might be to think you're being forgotten, that your silence is pushing them even further away. But the truth is much more complex and much more powerful. Avoidant individuals often feel a wave of relief after a breakup, not because they don't care, but because being emotionally close overwhelms them. That relief, however, is temporary. Because once the pressure of the relationship is gone and you're no longer reaching out, something unexpected happens. Your absence begins to echo in their mind, and that echo gets louder with every passing day. In the beginning, an avoidant ex might genuinely believe the breakup is a breath of fresh air. They've escaped emotional vulnerability. They've avoided feeling exposed. But then comes the quiet, the stillness. No texts, no calls, no late night apologies, no check-ins, and it's in that stillness that the reflection begins. Not just about you, but about themselves. They start noticing the space where you used to be, the routines that now feel off, the emotional stability that came from your presence, and most importantly, they begin noticing their own patterns, which they've spent years avoiding. Avoidants are masters of distraction. Whether it's through work, hobbies, or new relationships, they run from introspection. But when you cut contact and refuse to engage, they lose the ability to deflect. You're not giving them new messages to criticize or overanalyze. You're not flooding them with emotional demands. You're just gone. And that emptiness begins to demand their attention in a way that no words ever could. Your silence is louder than your presence ever was, because it forces them into a space they've been avoiding their whole life, emotional accountability. This kind of reflection doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. Slowly, they begin to question their initial assumptions. Was breaking up really the right call? Was the relationship as suffocating as they thought, or were they just scared of genuine closeness? Was your love truly overwhelming, or were they just overwhelmed by feelings they didn't know how to process? These are the kinds of thoughts that begin to creep in during no contact. And they are thoughts your avoidant ex wouldn't have confronted if you had kept chasing them. No contact forces them to sit in the discomfort of their own decisions. It puts the spotlight on the reasons they pushed you away, the ways they shut down, and the truth about how they emotionally sabotaged something that was real. In the silence, they start to feel the full weight of what they lost, not just the person, but the stability, the acceptance, the safety that came with you. And here's the kicker. They secretly hope you don't come back, not because they want to forget you, but because your silence relieves them of the guilt they don't know how to deal with. They hope you stay away long enough for them to figure themselves out without you witnessing their emotional mess. So while you're sitting there doubting your worth and wondering if your absence even matters, remember this. You're not being forgotten. You're being remembered in the deepest way possible. You've become the quiet catalyst that's making them face what they've spent years avoiding. That's not weakness. That's power. And that's why your no contact isn't just a boundary, it's a turning point. Avoidant individuals don't express emotions the way most people do. They don't beg for attention or chase after what they've lost. In fact, they often appear indifferent. But underneath that calm exterior is a deep and hidden truth. Your ability to walk away, your refusal to chase them during no contact, actually sparks something powerful in them, respect. Not just respect for you, but for your self-worth. You might think the only way to get through to them is by proving your love, by reaching out, by staying connected. But it's the opposite. The more you chase an avoidant, the more they pull away. It's when you stop chasing, when you stand in your own power, that everything begins to shift. Avoidants are wired to be hyper-independent. They associate emotional closeness with danger, not comfort. When someone gets too close, it triggers old wounds, usually from childhood, where love may have been conditional, inconsistent, or even harmful. So when you pull away, they don't initially register it as a loss. They interpret it as space they believe they need. But time has a way of revealing the truth, and space has a way of magnifying your value, especially when you don't come running back. By not chasing, you're sending a very specific and subconscious message to your avoidant ex. I won't lose myself for you. And that message cuts through their emotional armor like nothing else. You're no longer enabling their fear of intimacy. You're no longer participating in their emotional distancing. Instead, you've stepped out of the cycle, and that to them is both unsettling and magnetic. Avoidants expect people to try to fix things. They're used to being pursued because that dynamic feeds their need for space. But when you step back, you're breaking their pattern. You're not reacting. You're not feeding their fears or trying to fix their discomfort. And that is when something strange starts to happen. They begin to notice your strength. They begin to notice how grounded you are. You're not driven by desperation or fear of loss. You're anchored in your own value, and that changes how they see you entirely. Here's what makes this even more interesting. Avoidants don't even know this is happening consciously. They may not say it, they may not show it, but inside, they're drawn to the very thing that once made them uncomfortable, your emotional independence. It triggers curiosity. Why aren't they reaching out? Why aren't they fighting for this? And that curiosity leads to questioning. That questioning leads to reflection. And that reflection, if they're emotionally mature enough, leads to growth. By not chasing, you allow them to feel the absence of your presence. You allow them to wonder about your silence. You allow them to miss the security and acceptance you brought to the relationship. You see, when you were always available, always reaching out, it gave them an easy excuse to avoid confronting their own emotions. But when you stop, they don't have that distraction anymore. They have to face what they pushed away. And that's when respect is born, not from the pressure you used to apply, but from the peace you now radiate. So if you're doubting your silence, questioning your strength, or wondering if no contact is doing anything at all, understand this. Your self-respect is your greatest leverage. It's not manipulation. It's alignment. You are teaching them without saying a single word that your love is a privilege, not a guarantee, and that message is powerful enough to change everything. When you step into no contact, you're not just removing yourself physically, you're creating emotional distance. And for someone with avoidant attachment, Emotional distance doesn't mean they forget you. It means they finally start to feel you. It might seem like your silence is doing nothing, but in truth, it's doing the most. It's creating impact, emotional impact. Because while avoidants try to stay numb and disconnected, space has a way of unsettling that numbing. It creates contrast. You were once close, available, loving, and now you're not. That contrast gets louder with time, and it starts to rattle the very system they've built to protect themselves from vulnerability. Avoidants are drawn to stability even if they fear emotional intimacy. When you were with them, you were a grounding presence. You provided emotional safety even if they couldn't fully receive it. But now, in your absence, that emotional safety is gone, and they notice. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in quiet moments in the spaces where your presence used to exist. When they wake up and don't see your name on their phone, when they feel off and you're not there to support them, when they accomplish something and realize they don't have anyone they trust to share it with. That's where the emotional distance begins to create emotional impact. You're not reaching out. You're not explaining yourself. You're not begging for closure. You've gone silent, and that silence becomes a trigger. It forces them to feel things they've spent a lifetime avoiding: regret, guilt, longing, confusion. You might think that by staying silent, you're being forgotten. But that's just not how avoidants operate. They don't reach out when they miss you. They withdraw further. But the internal dialogue, it never stops. It gets louder. And it's filled with all the questions they never asked when you were around. Why did you leave so easily? Did you stop caring? Were you really as loyal as you seemed? The emotional impact of distance plants seeds of doubt in their own narrative. This is where the real shift happens. Because emotional distance removes the noise. It removes the tension, the overthinking, the emotional demands. And now that they aren't overwhelmed, they start to actually feel. That emotional distance gives them the room they need to realize your value, not because you're pushing it in their face, but because you're no longer accessible. You've taken your energy back, and that absence becomes a signal. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. You're no longer waiting on them to decide. You've decided for yourself. And that decision radiates confidence. Avoidants respond to what's consistent and calm. When you emotionally detach, you're no longer part of the emotional chaos they fear. You're no longer trying to control or fix anything. You're just gone. And that's what hits hardest. It's not the drama or the arguments they remember. It's the silence, the peace, the fact that you left without creating a storm. That emotional neutrality becomes magnetic because it's so rare in their world. So no, your emotional distance isn't pushing them further away. It's quietly shaking their internal world. It's forcing them to sit with what they've lost. And it's doing the one thing you could never do when you were too close. It's making them feel. You've become the lesson they didn't know they needed. And that emotional impact will linger far longer than any message ever could. You didn't disappear. You leveled up. And whether they admit it or not, they feel it. When you stop chasing your avoidant ex, something counterintuitive happens. Instead of pushing them further away, you're actually giving them something they've always wanted but never knew how to ask for: emotional safety. You see, avoidants are not wired to handle closeness the way secure people are. They crave love just like everyone else, but intimacy feels threatening to them. Emotional demands, intense conversations, and closeness can trigger a deep fear of being engulfed, judged, or not enough. So they shut down, not because they don't care, but because they don't feel safe. When you are constantly reaching out, trying to fix things, sending emotional messages, looking for answers, it may have felt to them like pressure, even if you were coming from a place of love. Avoidants interpret that kind of pursuit not as affection, but as an invasion. It threatens their sense of control, their space, and their coping mechanism of withdrawal. This is why chasing them doesn't work. It feeds their fear. But the moment you stop, the moment you go silent, that fear starts to relax. Silence to an avoidant ex isn't just the absence of words, It's the removal of emotional intensity, and that's when their nervous system starts to calm down. For the first time in a long time, they don't feel pushed, they don't feel cornered, and they don't feel emotionally flooded. In that space of calm, something new begins to rise, awareness, and more importantly, memory. They begin to remember the peaceful parts of the relationship, the safety of your presence, the reliability of your love. But now it's not tangled in fear because you're no longer right in front of them, asking for closeness. This is the emotional paradox of avoidance. They want intimacy, but only when it feels safe. And often that safety only arrives when you stop trying to create it for them. When you stop chasing, you take away the emotional tension. And without that tension, they begin to feel drawn to you. It's subtle, it's slow, but it's real. Because your silence shows them that you're not emotionally dependent on them. You're not seeking validation. You're not placing your worth in their hands. And that is what makes you feel safe to them, not emotionally overwhelming, but emotionally grounded. You're no longer trying to rescue them from themselves, and that gives them the room to actually reflect and feel. They may not reach out. They may not show it, but inside, your absence is experienced differently than anyone else's. You're no longer part of their emotional overload. You're now a source of calm they can recall without fear. You're the safe memory, the one who didn't scream, who didn't cling, who didn't try to force love. You simply step back. And here's the most important part. When someone starts to feel safe around you, even after you're gone, it changes how they see you. That emotional shift is powerful because while others may have triggered their defenses, you triggered something else. Acceptance without pressure. You gave them space without resentment. You left them without drama. And that for an avoidant is unforgettable. So if you're wondering whether your silence is making an impact, the answer is yes. It's not pushing them away. It's pulling them in quietly and gradually by creating the one thing they never had growing up, emotional safety. And that safety, that's the foundation of real love. Not chaos, not control, just peace. And right now, in the space you've created, they're beginning to feel it. No contact isn't a strategy to make someone miss you. It's a boundary that reclaims your self-worth. And for an avoidant X, that boundary isn't just a line in the sand. It becomes a turning point. Avoidant individuals are emotionally guarded for a reason. Somewhere along the way, love became unsafe. Vulnerability became something to be avoided. They learned to cope by shutting down, by creating emotional distance, and by pulling away the moment things started to feel too intense. So when the relationship ends and you go quiet, it seems like they win. It seems like they've gotten what they wanted: space, distance, and freedom. But what they don't expect is how powerful that silence becomes over time. Your decision to hold firm to no contact forces them into a place they don't visit often. Emotional accountability. Because for once, you're not enabling their pattern. You're not trying to fix them. You're not emotionally catering to their wounds. You're just gone. And that absence, that boundary, it begins to chip away at their carefully constructed emotional walls. Not because you're manipulating them, but because you've created the one condition that forces growth: space without pursuit. In the past, they could rely on you to be the emotional anchor. You were the one who showed up, who reached out, who explained, who apologized, who tried. But now, in your silence, they're left to face the emotional consequences of their actions. They don't have your comfort to fall back on. They don't have your reassurance to quiet their doubts. And as that silence stretches, something starts to happen internally. They begin to feel the absence of what they pushed away. That absence becomes discomfort. Then it turns into awareness. Then it transforms into realization. No contact becomes the catalyst for real change, not just in how they see you, but in how they see themselves. It's a confrontation they've been avoiding their whole life. Because without you chasing them, they can't blame the relationship's failure on your emotional neediness or your intensity or your timing. They're left to sit with their own decisions. They're forced to ask themselves the questions they were running from. Why did I pull away? Why couldn't I communicate? Why did I sabotage something that was good? And if they're emotionally mature enough, those questions start to lead to answers, and those answers lead to growth. That's the power of no contact. It disrupts the avoidance cycle, it breaks the push-pull dynamic, and it tells your avoidant ex something very clear. You're not afraid to walk away from someone who can't meet you emotionally. That kind of strength isn't just attractive, it's transformational. It gives them a model of what healthy love looks like, and it forces them to consider that maybe, just maybe, they need to face their fears instead of running from them. So when you wonder whether no contact is working, remember, it's not about what they're showing you on the outside. It's about what they're confronting on the inside. No contact is not a punishment. It's not revenge. It's an invitation for them to grow and for you to heal. And whether they come back or not, you've created the conditions for real change, not just in the relationship, but in yourself. You've stopped waiting to be chosen. You've chosen yourself. And that single decision may be the spark that finally wakes them,